Propaganda is everywhere. Our feeds and TV screens are flooded with propaganda that is well-funded and carefully curated by forces that are trying to control your mind. From the products you buy to the wars you do or don't support, all of your choices are being influenced by these forces. But how propaganda actually works and what it's really capable of achieving is more misunderstood than most people realize, which is exactly what we'll address in this video.
Military-industrial complex.
Not because they are easy, but because they are hard.
In simple terms, propaganda, or as it is now called, public relations, is defined as ideas, facts, or allegations spread deliberately to further one's cause, or to damage an opposing cause. So right away, you can see that it is quite broad both in its definition and its application. The father of propaganda is this man, Edward Bernays. He's actually the nephew of legendary psychologist Sigmund Freud, and the co-founder of Netflix, Mark Randolph, is actually their descendant. During World War I, Bernays worked for the U.S. Committee on Public Information to help shape public opinion. And this is why he later rebranded propaganda to public relations, because the word propaganda gained a heavily negative meaning due to its heavy use by Germany during the war.
I decided that if you could use propaganda for war, you could certainly use it for peace. And propaganda got to be a bad word because of the Germans using it. So what I did was to try to find some other words. So we found the word council on public relations.
But before we dive into the tactics that Bernays deployed to shape and wield public opinion, we must first take a look at the forces that influenced and informed him. First, you have Gustave Le Bon, a French polymath trained in medicine, and he wrote on topics across psychology, sociology, anthropology, and even physics. His most notable work being The Crowd, a study of the popular mind, published in 1895. Le Bon found that when individuals join a crowd, they undergo a psychological transformation. They appear to lose their individual mind and cease to think critically or rationally. Le Bon states that they instead merge into a collective group mind that is impulsive, emotional, and far less intelligent than any one member alone. To him, crowds think in images and slogans. They do not consider rational arguments, and they don't reason toward a conclusion. In fact, they become controlled by a conclusion projected onto them. And the more simple that conclusion is, the more appealing it can be to the crowd mind. There are a number of mechanisms for how this works, but the two most active concepts at play here are first, a contagion, and second, the collective mind, sometimes referred to as the group mind or crowd mind. The contagion is the emotions and or ideas that spread through a crowd, almost like a virus. One person's response triggers the same response in everyone nearby, so it spreads. Then you have the collective mind, which is the shared psychological entity a crowd becomes, which is not just the sum of its members' individual minds. It is the culmination of the contagion. And then you have Walter Lippmann, American journalist and political commentator, published Public Opinion back in 1922. He actually first introduced the idea of the Cold War and even coined the phrase stereotype. Lippmann's influential insights within the realm of public opinion also led to the observation of what I call the complexity problem, which is basically the idea that the world is too big, too complex, and too fast-moving for any person to actually perceive it directly. And so, people build a simplified mental model of it instead and act on that model rather than reality itself. And now just apply that to modern day with billions of people with their own unique, carefully curated algorithms, along with the fact that we live in our own bubbles and echo chambers. Our shared reality is fragmented and distorted beyond belief. It is no surprise then why we are seemingly so divided and why our trust in our institutions has collapsed. The realizations by Le Bon and Lippmann were warning signs at first, but Bernays would go on to use these insights as a manual to harness the power of the public mind. Propaganda works by bypassing your reasoning and going straight for your human instincts. It does this by focusing on the fear, pride, or belonging you already feel. Then it repeats simple images and stereotypes until they feel like your own conclusions. And they do it by using trusted messengers, which is where celebrities, newspapers, and doctors come in. From there, Bernays creates his idea of the engineering of consent, which is achieved by using scientific and psychological methods to win support without the audience realizing they're being steered. But this is often the most misunderstood aspect of propaganda or public relations. because research shows you cannot get the crowd to hold a sentiment that isn't already there. And that's exactly where his other idea comes in, crystallizing, which is outlined in another book of his titled Crystallizing of Public Opinion, which is done by taking a vague, already existing public sentiment and giving it a sharp, memorable shape. In other words, you take a real public feeling, fear or hope, and you give it symbols and slogans to latch onto. That way the crowd can act upon it. This method has been used throughout human history. And this is exactly how his idea of the invisible government retains its control over the public mind, which is the term Bernays used for the small expert class he believed must steer the irrational masses. Sound familiar? So now that we have a better understanding behind the theory and concepts that drove Bernays' research, let us now take a look at how he deployed it throughout history. Bernays worked for the United Fruit Company, whose profits were threatened when Guatemala's government redistributed some of its unused land to poor farmers. His job was to make Americans believe that Guatemala's government was secretly controlled by communists. He did this by flying journalists to Guatemala, feeding them information that favored United Fruit, and getting major papers, like the New York Times, to publish stories claiming the country was infiltrated by communism. He even staged a private survey that conveniently confirmed the same story he was already telling. The propaganda campaign was a success. American public opinion turned against Guatemala's government, and the CIA got the political cover it needed to go in. In 1954, the CIA carried out a coup that overthrew Guatemala's elected president and installed a military dictatorship. The country then fell into a civil war that lasted almost 40 years and killed roughly 200,000 people. Bernays had similar success with a domestic campaign in the United States back in 1929. He was hired by the American Tobacco Company to help sell cigarettes to women, who were largely considered off-limits as customers because smoking in public was seen as improper for them at the time. Rather than advertise the cigarettes directly, he consulted a psychoanalyst who suggested that cigarettes symbolized male power. And Bernays built a campaign around convincing women that smoking was a symbol of their own independence and freedom. He hired a group of young women to march in New York's Easter Parade and light cigarettes together in public, timed for newspaper photographers to capture the moment. He branded the cigarettes they smoked as torches of freedom, tying the act directly to women's rights and personal liberty. This was yet another successful propaganda campaign. It helped break the taboo around women smoking in public and opened up a massive new market for the tobacco industry. It also became one of the earliest examples of a company using a social cause to sell a product. The result was a lasting public health disaster, as millions of women took up a habit that led to widespread smoking-related illness and death in the decades that followed. But it's important that you understand that none of this stopped being used the day that Bernays died. These methods are still very much alive in every corner of our lives. Today, an influencer posting about a product is playing the same role as Bernays' doctors endorsing bacon. A sponsored article dressed up like a real news story is playing the same role as his planted newspaper reports. Fake reviews and coordinated online posts are playing the same role as his staged surveys. I mean, sure, the tools got faster and the audience may be a lot bigger, but the methods are still largely the same as the ones he built 100 years ago. You repeat a simple image, you borrow a trusted voice, and you let the algorithm do the rest of the spreading for you. And Bernays actually predicted this would never go away. Near the end of his book, Propaganda, he wrote that intelligent people needed to see propaganda as a tool that they could use for good purposes, one that could help bring order out of chaos. He believed persuasion itself was neutral. It could just as easily build trust as break it down. Researchers have spent decades studying how to build resistance to manipulation, and the most effective method is called pre-bunking. So instead of correcting a lie after it spreads, you actually teach people to recognize the technique behind it before they ever see it. Once you can spot a manufactured survey or a fake sense of urgency or a stereotype being repeated on purpose, then that technique loses most of its power over you. Pairing that with a habit of checking a claim against other sources before accepting it gives you a real defense, something Bernays himself never offered his readers. And again, this is the whole point of this video. Recognizing propaganda is only the first step. The second step is using these same tools honestly and out in the open, the way I just did with you in this video. As we've learned, it's easy to get the crowd to believe in something, so we should work to make them believe in something good. But actually, who decides what is good? I guess that's a video for another time. Thanks for watching.